Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is BLEAV.
Hello and welcome to the Hoosier Football Tailgate 2025 first edition. I hope everyone had a good and happy holiday season. As we start to pick up the steam as we roll into the new year here in 2025, Final Four is all set at the college football playoffs with Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, and Texas. The remaining four, we'll talk a little bit about that later. And as far as all the bowl seasons go, it looks like the SEC is licking some of their wounds as they have been dominated against some of the Big Ten teams like Michigan, who beat Alabama, and Illinois, who will be on the schedule next year for the Indiana Hoosiers. Brett Bielema's team is going to be a strong team again next year, and one that will probably be highly rated and talked about in the same aspect that Indiana was this year as a potential college football playoff team. So they look like they're prime and ready to make another go at it with Altmaier there as their quarterback. But a lot of good things happening in 2025. We're going to talk about everything that has happened here within the last 2 weeks, as it's been pretty much nonstop with different aspects of the program, commitments, portal commitments, both for and guys moving on from Indiana as we head into this 2025 season. Let's talk about BetOnline, our sponsor tonight. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to the in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds, everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, NHL, to the UFC, head on over to BetOnline today. Don't forget to use the promo code BLEAV for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here, as well as all of our affiliates that have been proudly a part of the Hoosier Football Tailgate all year long. You can find them on our link tree on all of our profiles. If you do get something from there, by all means, we appreciate it. We do receive some sort of commission for that sale. And like I said in advance, if you happen to do that, great. We'll probably get some more involvement with affiliates heading into the next year, as things with the channel have gone pretty well here over the last few weeks, as we finish up with about through the month of December, I believe we had 70,000 plus views on our YouTube channel, which I can't thank you enough for all of that as we head on into the 2025 year. Also, if you're in any of the chat rooms, by all means, please feel free to add to the show, ask questions, comments, suggestions. By all means, if I find I can get to your chat, I will be glad to put it up and we can talk more openly about any questions that one may have. But again, doing these lives, if you want to get involved with us on this side of the coin, greatly appreciate it. And hope everyone, like I said, has had a safe holiday season. It's been wild and fast. I know in some of the Indiana areas down in the southern part of Indiana right now is getting hammered with snow. 8 to 12 inches is expected in the southern part of Indiana, along with some ice, and in that central part about 5 to 7 inches. But here in the north, we are going to escape this round of snow, which I'm greatly happy for. I'm ready for 60-degree weather, so my knee doesn't have to go through the months of January and February with every different type of aspect to it with my knee and such. So hopefully we'll get back to quick weather, warmth as soon as possible. Also, I'm apologizing in advance for whatever reason our feed to YouTube is not going through, I suppose, as it's been notifying me that it is not currently happening. So my apologies for that. Hopefully we can upload this afterwards and get it on YouTube if that's the area that you like to watch. But it's been an interesting few weeks here after the season and the defeat to Notre Dame. And it was good to see Notre Dame beat Georgia and smack them around. I thought they played even better against Georgia than they did Indiana, which was very surprising because I did not anticipate them to handle Georgia the way they handled them. They handled them pretty easily on that game. And then, of course, the Arizona State-Texas game filled with controversy with a no targeting call that would have ultimately gave Arizona State a first down and probably an attempt at a field goal. Don't know what would have happened there, but them blowing that call ultimately kind of took that opportunity away from Arizona State and provided a way that Texas was able to survive in overtime. And what can you say about the Buckeyes right now? I don't think there's any team playing any better than Ohio State. They are on fire on every phase of the game, and I'm not sure anybody can beat them. I just don't think that's going to happen. And there's a high probability that we're going to have an all Big Ten national final. And wouldn't that be something for the SEC to kind of choke on for a while? But I digress. But first and foremost, I want to talk here a little bit about some of the things that have happened in the portal of late. As you guys know, that Taven Jackson has moved on to UCF there with the new coaching staff and Scott Frost, who was hired back there, which was kind of a shock a little bit that he was rehired. But then again, he had a lot of success there, and they're hoping that he can recreate it. But they're in a very tough conference now. They're not, in a conference in the American Conference that they were, where they were pretty much the dominant team. But Taven getting the opportunity to go to UCF, it looks like he'll be given the opportunity to be the guy, or at least to earn that opportunity there at Central Florida. And I think that will fit Taven well in what they do. Now, whether or not they utilize him in the run game, which I think they ought to do, and I would have assumed that's kind of some of the things they were talking about. At the same time, Taven is going to be a quarterback in that system, is going to have to run the football some. So it will be interesting to see how they mold their system around him, but good for Taven Jackson. I wish him the best. I think he's a class kid. I wish he'd have stayed here, but unfortunately, he felt it was time to move on. And hey, can't blame a kid for looking for opportunities that best suit his abilities and what he can do as a quarterback. And like I said, there's not too many kids out there that just want to sit and wait and see what happens. But the craziest thing that we learned over the holidays is Curtis Rourke played all year on a retorn ACL. I know I was kind of perusing through the Twitter feeds and such, and somebody had put up a photo of Curtis in the spring game, and he did not have a brace on his knee. And then there was a brace the first game of the season. So between the end of spring and the first game of the season, something happened where he retore the knee that he tore up at OU. And that's why he had a knee brace on. I just assume it was for just protection. But for that kid to play an entire year with a torn ACL is something amazing. It just goes to show you the toughness that he has. And it will ultimately, his opportunity in the NFL, because I think his draft stock rose quite a bit during the year. Now, the big thing that you get into now is him having surgery on it. And the recovery from that is more than likely not going to enable him to compete or participate in any type of pro day per se or the combine. And whether or not that hurts his opportunities as a draft prospect, I don't know. But I know the PFF had put out their top 10 quarterbacks, and I know they had Curtis at number 10. Kyle McCord was number 9. And I thought, man, I don't even see where these guys fit. These guys are better in the top 5 because who they had in front of them, I didn't think were anywhere close to what they bring to the table as a quarterback. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And then the news just keeps on getting better. Tyler Cherry expected to be in the hunt or competing for the starting quarterback position this year with Alberto Mendoza, as well as Grant Wilson. We'll talk about Grant here in a second. And Fernando Mendoza from Cal, Alberto's brother, had an injury happen the week of Notre Dame to his knee, and it sounds as if he will not be able to participate in anything throughout the next semester at Indiana, which is bad. For the kid. I just, a lost spring for him is critical in his development. He's not going to be able to participate in that. The only time he'll be able to come back will be in the fall. They'll pretty much have their depth chart set, how that impacts his ability on where he sets in the mindset of a new coach coming in as well. Remember, they brought in a new quarterback coach into the fray. Whitmer has been hired by Kurt Cignetti to be the quarterback coach, pass game coordinator, taking over for Tino. So you got Tyler Cherry is going to sit out while the new coach is in play. He won't be able to display his abilities until the fall. Well, that could be a huge impact. So that's something to keep an eye on as we head through the spring and into the fall on what all that looks like for Tyler. And hopefully it's something that can be fixed in a relatively short recovery time, and he's able to get ready to go for fall camp. With that being said, then you look at some of the things here that happened as it pertains to another quarterback that Indiana went back in on, a true 2025 quarterback, Jacob Bell out of Illinois. He had been on a couple visits to Indiana during the season. I believe there was an offer extended from Ball State. They had a change in staff is when Indiana came back in because he did not sign the early signing period. They came back in and offered him, and of course, like any kid would have, to play in the Big Ten, he accepted their offer. Now, he was rated as 2-star commit, 6'3", so he's a good-sized kid. I've watched him. He's athletic. He can throw the football pretty decently. You can see, based upon what Indiana knew with it when it pertains to, Taven into the portal, Tyler injured and not going to be able to participate. And then, of course, the graduation of Curtis, you could see why Indiana went out and got a true freshman quarterback from a depth purposes, alone. So that in itself will be a very vital, important process for Indiana here to go through with some of these things that they're going to have to shore up at the quarterback position. And that is why they have gone out and taken these guys late with the addition of these quarterbacks from the portal, Grant Wilson being one. And then, of course, Jacob Bell, the true freshman, being the second one involved in this aspect of things. So speaking of the portal, we talked a little bit about Tyler Cherry. We're going to go down here and talk a little bit more about, the portal and what all has transpired here in a short period of time. I've got some of the tweets that I'm going to pull up as we go through this here quickly. But, we all know about Mr. Mendoza. If I have time, I'll show some video of him. Played at Cal. Tall, lanky kid, 6'3", maybe 210 pounds. So he's not a overly, built kid for 6'3". Moves well in the pocket, throws a decent ball. I would say he's a very smart, analytical type of player. And he should fit well into this Mike Shanahan's offensive scheme and such. He is a different quarterback than Curtis Rourke. More mobile, probably a little bit more utilization, maybe in the quarterback run game. That's a possibility as well. But a solid pickup. Of course, his brother Alberto is here, so those two being in the same quarterback room will be special for them. And I'm sure that there'll be a chance for those two to really compete against each other. But Mendoza's services was wanted by multiple teams, including Georgia, which he did visit. Whether or not, the package they had put together for him was the same that Indiana had, I don't know. He does have an NIL evaluation on on3.com of about $1 million. So who knows on all that with all the profit sharing that's going to come back into the fold next year, this coming year, as well as what NIL possibilities lie there. So he's sitting pretty with where he's at. And I would say he is the successor to Curtis Rourke and will have the opportunity to fully earn all that in front of Coach Whitmer and Shanahan and Signetti as they head through the spring. One thing to establish as well, all of these commits will be on campus to be in the second semester at Indiana. And I do believe 14 of the 25 freshman commits are all early enrollees as well. So a lot of freshmen will be in and partaking in the second semester, which is a great thing for Indiana to have. The next gentleman that Indiana did take advantage of, well, I hope we get up here in a second. Yes, is this gentleman here, Mr. Grant Wilson. Now, he's interesting. He's transferred twice. He was at Fordham before that, went to Old Dominion. He was injured this year for the better part of the year. He actually got a lot of playing time in 2023 and played against Coach Signetti in the Sun Belt Conference. So there were some mutual reasons here, having played against this young man. Again, he's another big kid, 6'3". He's a little bit bigger than Mendoza, but same in that lanky proposition. But Indiana signed him, and I was a little surprised at that because this was all before we knew about Tyler Cherry's injury. But at the same time, you're bringing in a kid that's a 1-year player, and it'll be interesting how this all stacks up with Fernando and all the other quarterbacks that they bring this young man in. Throws a good ball, has done a lot of good things. Watch video of him today. And, he's very promising. So I think he's going to add to the room, and I think there'll be a very good, healthy competition in the room. And remember, having that being a very competitive room helps Indiana in terms of the quarterback position because it'll get the best out of all of them. So, but a pickup that didn't make sense at the time, but when you learned of all the scenarios that happened between the holidays, you understand now why he was signed. The other big pickup was Roman Hemby, the running back from Maryland. This one was a little bit of a shock, but he had a good game against Indiana when they played up here. I like this young man. He's got the breakaway speed that Indiana really lacked with Ellison and Lawton. He has a little bit more of the ability to take a 5-yard gain and make it a 75-yard touchdown. So him on the cusp of coming in and being the possible line to compete against Black is one of them who is back. He's got one more year. He's the other one that was probably third on the depth chart. They utilized him some early on, but then they just kind of went to a 2-man rotation. But Hemby, I do think he was a really good get for Indiana. And then the first one they got was the BB kid out of UAB. At 800 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. UAB have struggled as a football program after being reestablished not too long ago. So this young man will be interesting, and I should rephrase his name. It's Lee BB Jr. But I'm interested to see how this kid stacks up with him being black. But again, a strong running back room for Indiana heading into spring ball. Then at wide receiver, big commitment, I believe, the other day is the gentleman coming in from Michigan, Tyler Harris. Now, we lost Donovan McCulley to them, and they're opposites in that regard. Donovan's a more tall, lanky kid. This young man, although he's not a pretty decent size, I do believe he's got a little bit more speed on the top end. So he'll be interested. Actually scored a touchdown in their game against Alabama last year. Actually, it was the first touchdown of the game, and he showed some speed on that. So pretty excited that they were able to get this young man. I do think he'll be a very good get and adds to that room already with Elijah Surratt in there and some others. So, and then they get the young man from Appalachian State, Mekhi Jackson. Again, 5 touchdowns this season, about 800 yards of receptions. Again, with the Sun Belt connection, so they know about this young man's ability. And remember, Curt Cignetti is very, very adamant. He does not want any portal guys that do not have film that cannot be evaluated. They want proof on video of one's ability. And he was one that they were able to get. So 2 big pickups there in the wide receiver room. Again, adding to what they lost in graduation. And I do think those 2, Harris and Jackson, are going to add to the pieces of the puzzle for Indiana. Then when you get into the secondary aspect of it, the D-line aspect of it, this Dominic Radcliffe young, hit the wrong one there. There we go. Knight from Northern Illinois. This is the kid that's against Notre Dame, had the big interception. I do think he's going to add to what D'Angelo adds to the one side of the field. So I do think they strengthen themselves here. And then in the back end of it all, you got Lewis Moore coming back, which I thought was interesting. We got 2 former Indiana Hoosiers coming back into the fold with Curt Cignetti. Lewis Moore was here prior to Curtis, before Coach Cignetti came aboard. He was in the portal, decided to make a move to Ole Miss. They were in need of his services, thought it was a better opportunity. I did talk to Bryant Haynes about him. He's thrilled to have him back. He said he had a good opportunity with Ole Miss, but felt that things fell short for him there, and that's why he's coming back. And they're glad to have him because they're going to need some help on that back end, and Lewis provides that back end help that they'll need. So, again, 2 big commits in the secondary for Indiana. Then you get to the D-line, Dominic Ratcliffe, a really good pickup for Indiana as well. Good-looking kid, size, speed, physicality, all that. Hosa Wheeler is another kid that's Indiana picked up in the portal early on. Another big-time defensive lineman, losing C.J. West. These 2 guys stepping into the fray, I do think, is a big-time opportunity for Indiana with the defensive line adding to what they've already got. But I do think it's going to help them immensely with that defensive line help that they're going to need in trying to replace some of the guys they lost, Carr, CJ, and some of those guys. But these 2 big guys are interior guys that I think will add to that defensive line. And then they did pick up some people on the offensive line, the first one, an Ohio State kid. He is an Indiana born and raised young man, I believe. He's out of Floyd Central down there in the southern part of Indiana. Zen is a big boy. He's about 6'8", big, strong-looking kid, predominantly a backup. Now, he's been hurt all for the better part of the last half of the season as he was a number 2. I am pretty sure that he has continued on with Ohio State and will until the season is completed. But things didn't pan out for him there in terms of being in that top 5, and he's going to look for an opportunity with Indiana. And I tell you, big boy, and I think he'll help because of losing some of our offensive linemen. But Carter Smith and this young man anchoring the offensive line will be a big help. And then the other former Hoosier, after going to Colorado, coming back, Khalil Benson, he went to Colorado to play for Dion. And a little surprised by this one as well. I'm sure Coach Bostad spoke up for Khalil. And, a little surprised that they did bring him back and the offensive line. Do I think he has ability? Absolutely. Do I think he is a top guy? I'm not quite sure there. It's going to depend on where he fits into the equation because they moved him around at Colorado and he ended up losing his starting position. He was at tackle, he's at guard, and then I think he was out of the starting 5. But Indiana needing some help in the offensive line, you're bringing back a guy that's got experience. He's familiar with Indiana. He's familiar with Coach Bob Bostad. And I think all those things were pivotal in bringing him back to the fray. And as you can see there, Indiana was able to do quite well in the portal here of late. And we'll wait and see what happens with spring ball. We'll see what all happens with some of these guys, whether or not they stick, some of the returners and other players, what their prospects will be when we get to that spring portal after spring ball, and we'll see what's available. I do not think Indiana is done. I do think it will depend on what will happen through spring and whether or not, they stay free from injury and free from defections from the roster, things of that nature. But again, I'm anticipating they're going to have a really good group of guys in the fold for this winter months, as well as through the spring ball. And again, they hired the gentleman from the NFL, Chandler Whitmer, with the Atlanta Falcons. He's a kind of a quarterback guru, been with a lot of different organizations, so he'll bring a lot of experience and NFL knowledge into the fray, as well as the passing game, which I think will be helpful. We'll all have to wait and see. Highly recommended from Coach Signetti's perspective. So I think in his mind, he's got a dandy as a new quarterback coach, kind of the young and upper comer in some respects, what Tino was. So we'll see what all happens with that and everything that goes with it. But we'll see what happens here when we get to all that. And before we jump over to some film on Alberto and Grant Wilson here, before we let you go for the evening. This year was a year that Indiana had a lot of things in their favor, from a schedule and the ability to get themselves off on the right foot, win columns and such, and garner confidence and belief and stuff. And they were able to do some things that maybe many people did not think they were going to be able to do, and had a great year. Now, moving forward, the next step for them will be harder. It's not going to be an easy thing. We saw where Indiana was in terms of talent overall against Notre Dame's and Ohio State's and even Michigan. And we know that where they're at And where those guys are up here and Indiana's somewhere down here, they've got to find a way to elevate that area. And I know that people want to look on the subjective line of look at this team versus that team on the field and, who looks good, who doesn't look good. Hey, look, it doesn't matter what you look like. It matters how you play. And some of those kids, look, Ohio State has a lot of no-doubters. It doesn't take a rocket science to recruit the kids that they recruit, because a lot of them are no-doubters. I mean, I could recruit there. You could recruit there with the opportunity that they have because of who they are. Indiana has to break into that stratosphere and get some of that name recognition that allows them to go compete for 4- and 5-star recruits against the top-tiered programs in the country. But they're going to have to, that next step for them is going to be a little bit more difficult. Nobody else is going to be able to be snuck up on. Now, they do have a good forgiving schedule. They got 4 games in a row at home, I believe. They open up against Old Dominion, which I would say that is not an easy opener. Old Dominion is a good team and out of the Sun Belt. So they're not going to be some slouch. Then they got Kennesaw State coming in as well. And I do believe they have Indiana State on the schedule out of that first 4 weeks at home. And, they go to Illinois, they go to Penn State, they go to Oregon. So these are some of these tough games that they're going to have on the road. No, Illinois comes here. Excuse me. Illinois comes here. So I do believe they do have 7 home games next year, but it's not going to be an easy track moving forward because everybody's fully aware of what Indiana's capable of. So it'll be a bigger step for them overall when you look at things like this. And Indiana's going to have to figure out a way to get themselves in a position where they can have the success they do. And they're, with the new quarterback, new system and all, this is a little bit of Fernando. Again, good escapability, runs well, was able, he's a very gutsy kid. That's the one thing that now knowing that Curtis had a torn ACL, he didn't move very well in the pocket. Now we know why. And Fernando's one of those guys that can put the ball in a spot that's catchable, highly accurate with his football, but he's not afraid to pull it down and do what he does here. Here he shows his speed. That's against Stanford and, does it good there. Here's a game against an ACC against North Carolina State. Again, not afraid to pull it down if need be and run it. So I like what you get from him. So he will be an interesting thing to observe and watch. Here he's throwing a nice ball deep, good air underneath it. I don't know how strong his arm is. It looks pretty good. He looks like he can make all the throws in that regard. And I think it's an exciting thing to have him and Alberto in the fray because, it's going to be one of those things that they probably both have a little of each other in them and ability-wise. But Fernando can throw it on a rope like he did there. Very good mechanics. And another thing, they can move the pocket. And this is against Miami, so this was no slouch. And they should have beat Miami, to be honest with you. Here's kind of a RPO type of play. You can see his quickness and his delivery. So he's got a lot of positives in it for him. Got to move it over here to Grant. This is the young man from Old Dominion. This is against South Carolina. This is a nice ball. He throws down the field. They almost beat South Carolina. But good over-the-shoulder throw. They lost by 3 points, 4 points to South Carolina. I can't remember. Again, good deep in cut. You can see him. Good mechanics. So, again, these guys have got good mechanics. He stands tall in the pocket, and, he can make all the throws. So it's going to be an interesting spring competition with these two because they're very identical, very similar in their styles, very similar in their throwing motion. here's one he's sticking it into coverage, well against the blitz. Here they're bringing pressure, and he's able to get it in and out of his hands on a one-on-one route to the sidelines. Another little bit pressure, sticking in there, finding that open receiver, making a great throw. So you can see this Grant Wilson kid is pretty darn good as well. And he can also tuck it and run. So you can see that both these guys have some special things about them at the quarterback position that you get a little excited about. And having two of them, even better, because I think it's going to make it very interesting as we go through spring practice and such to see not only their development, but Alberto Mendoza's development and where he stacks up in all this. There's going to be plenty of reps to go around, but those two cats, Fernando and Grant, are two top end quarterbacks that I think it'll be interesting to see. Grant a little bit more like Curtis in the sense that he was injured and didn't have a lot of tape of this year, but plenty of last year. He did well. He had his best game in 23 was against Coach Signetti in JMU, where he had a career best 390 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. So they're very, very familiar with him. And for them to take him, they must have felt, hey, we know this cat and he can provide us a lot of opportunity, and see what happens between him and Fernando through the spring, because we're going to have at least 2, if not 3 ready, because in the Big Ten, you're always one snap away, and especially at the quarterback position and such. So, but hey, I appreciate you guys joining me, that we're able to jump on here. Fat Boy, I appreciate your commentary as always. And sorry about the little mix up there at the beginning, but do appreciate you guys jumping on tonight on this cold and wintry night in the southern part of Indiana, especially down in Bloomington, where they're getting hit with a lot of snow. So those guys and gals that are heading back to campus, I hope they get back safely, as well as others that are moving around in this type of weather. And 2025 hopes to be another big year for the Indiana Hoosiers. Remember, we'll have you covered here A to Z right here on the Hoosier Football Tailgate on the BLEAV Network. For now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and this has been the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on BLEAV.